This is like the first installment of Spooky Betches. I'm Holly.
I'm Kirsten, and so basically the show is going to be not just paranormal stuff, because today we're talking about our own paranormal experiences, but it will cover unsolved mysteries, cold cases, urban legends, UFOs, and secret codes. Basically anything that doesn't have a straight answer, this show will cover at some point. We're roommates in college, and we both have an interest in this kind of otherworld mysteries that don't really have any explanation. And we started talking about it a lot in around fall 2016, and we were just joking around one day and being like, well, what if we had like a radio show? That would be really funny and cool. Like, what would we talk about? Like, what would we do? And then, probably in a matter of like 5 hours, I had like come up with a complete list of like 100 different mysteries that we could talk about. Of course, listeners, if you want to mention a few mysteries that you would like covered, or anything that you find interesting, or your own personal experiences, of course, you can send a email to spookybetches@gmail.com. Also, we have a Tumblr page already. So why don't we go into about ourselves?
Okay. Should I kick it off? You have a lot more interesting stories with it.
Well, I would talk about... I think I'll just introduce myself just for people that don't know me. My name's Kirsten. I'm a 20-year-old college student. We're both college students. I grew up in a rural area in the South, below the Mason-Dixon line. I grew up on a sheep farm, in a very old stone house. I had a great childhood. But looking back, I kind of noticed that a lot of women in my family are kind of sensitive. I think especially my mom, myself, and my sister in general are pretty sensitive. My mom more hears stuff, I see stuff, and my sister kind of just like attracts things. So, do you want to tell your story, or do you want to...
I can just introduce myself.
Okay.
And I'm Holly. I'm a 19-year-old college student, and I obviously go to school with Kirsten. That's how this all started. I grew up like on the coast in New England, and I'm very interested in this kind of stuff, and I wouldn't call myself like a skeptic, but I'm like definitely kind of like on the line of like, I'm curious, I'm not sure if I think anything of certain things, and I'm interested in exploring.
Yeah, and I think that kind of creates an interesting dynamic, because I'm pretty much the exact opposite. If you show me something, I will automatically believe it's true, and you're kind of the more skeptical one, being like, I don't know, but I'm not a Christian. I was raised Catholic Episcopalian, but now I am an Irish Reconstructionist pagan, so I don't believe in Jesus or God. I believe in the old gods from Ireland and the British Isles. So, I mean, if any of the listeners want to hear about that, I can definitely do a mini pod series or podcast on that. But I think that does create an interesting dynamic between us. So, if you don't mind, I can go into my first story.
Go right ahead.
All right. So, my house has always been haunted. Even before I can remember, my mom mostly has said strange things have happened in our house. And our property goes back to around 1790 in documents. And there's actually a really funny story. My mom was trying to find deeds to our house. When we moved in, I was probably like 3 or 4, and everyone who lived in the area said, oh, you'll never find anything on that house. It's so old, it's been so many different things, it's just impossible. And she went to the archives in our state. She asked the librarian, where should I look? And they're like, oh, you'll never find it. But she went to a shelf, she picked out the first book, opened right to the page that had everything about our house in it. And I think that's a really interesting story, because I think that's like very much the kind of sensitive my mom is. She's very good at predicting things and feeling things. She has a very good vibe. She's a very good judge of character, and she can really, like, she knew that it would be in this book. Something told her that this book would have everything about our house, and it did. It really, like, labeled everything, told everything. I remember hearing somewhere that before it was settled on, it was Native American land. I don't know if that's true. As a child, I remember my mom, my sister, and I do have a dad. He's in the picture. A lot of stories involve the women in my family. And so I just remember when I was little, we would go through the river that ran through our property, and I could find just like artifacts in the water. Like I would find like little lead toys from like the 1800s, or I think I remember my sister finding like an arrowhead, like a lot of energy and a lot of things that were just like left from time. But I guess I should actually move on to actual like recorded things that happened besides those things. So the first ghost, I guess, story that I could remember didn't take place at my home. Actually, it took place on a vacation that my parents, my sister, and I took, and we were in the Bermuda area, and we're taking a family photo, and it was in front of a giant mirror, and it was a flash photo. And when we got home, I was probably 3 or 4, and I think that's around the time that everything started happening for me. Like, noticeably, there are paranormal things I started noticing as around a 3 or 4 year old. And when my mom developed the film, I looked at that photo, and in the flash reflection on the mirror, I said, Mommy, look at that man's face in the flash. And she was like, what do you mean? I said, Mom, there's a man's face in like the mirror. And she looked at it and she was like, oh my God, there is. Like, where did that come from? Like, that's terrifying. And I didn't really pay any attention to it. I don't really remember that story, but my mom really remembers it very clearly. It was like that being like one of the first things that she noticed from me as a child. And from still today, we have a lot of experiences, my mom and I. Wherever we go, we travel a lot, and she'll take photos somewhere and there'll be something wrong with the photo. We might find like an orb in it, or there might be like an actual figure in it. Just like a little quick story. My mom went to France, and she went to Giverny, where Monet lived, later in his life, where he painted the water lilies and all those beautiful paintings. And she took a picture of an empty chair and in a very green, grassy landscape. And when she had the film developed, there was a man sitting in the chair, and Holly's seen the picture. Like,
yeah, it's a man. There's literally a man.
There's a man.
There's
there.
A reflection and everything in the water.
Yeah, it's right in front of where the water was. There's a reflection of the man. He's in pretty 19th century garb. He's wearing like a white tailored suit, a boater's hat. He has like a goatee, like a red goatee. Like, he's very 1800s. Like, It's definitely a man and definitely a person. And maybe one day we'll post that on Tumblr if my mom allows it, because that's one of her like prized possessions. She's just like, I found this, I captured it, and she's so proud of it. But so things like that. I guess I can go on to my last story. My mom has more ghost stories, but maybe one day she'll tell you them. I don't want to take all her stories away from her. But I must have been, this is many years later, probably when I was around 10. And I still have had experiences since then, but not as notably poignant and I can remember as clearly as this one. I would frequently watch TV in my parents' bedroom because they had like a huge bed, or they have a huge bed and a TV, and I would just lay in their bed, and they had like they have silky soft sheets, and I would lay in it and I would watch TV. And I remember going up to their TV is probably from like the 90s, so it's the kind you need to like push the like button, and it goes like wing, and like makes this whole sound, like the sharp sound. And I turned it on, and I went to turn it on, I should say. And in the reflection of the TV, I saw an old woman not looking at me or anything, looking actually like away from me. I didn't see her back, I saw her side. On the other side of my parents' bed. And she was hunched over. She had a shawl that was like hand knit. She was in like a long skirt. She had gray hair. I think she was wearing like wire rimmed glasses. It was obviously like an old woman. And I can remember screaming because I was terrified. And I don't think I've ever run so fast in my life. I ran out of my parents' bedroom, like slammed the door. Went to my mom and was like, I just saw a person in your TV. And she was like, what? Like, what do you mean? Like, she thought that I'd actually seen a person. And she went upstairs and was like, there's nobody upstairs. And I was like, I swear to God, I saw an old woman in the reflection of the TV. She's like, that's terrifying. And I later found out that the previous owner's grandmother died in my bedroom.
Oh.
Yeah. So I think it was his grandmother. It was either his mother or his grandmother. Which terrified me. I was one of those kids that like made my mom sleep with them until I was around 10. So that definitely didn't help. Mm-hmm. I was terrified. It took a long time for me to actually get over it, but that's one of the most memorable experiences that I've had.
So you have like a lot of photo and reflection experiences?
Yeah.
Do you have like a particular suspicion or like, I don't know how to phrase this? Like
I will say that my mother has so many mirrors up in our house. Mm-hmm. And from a very young age, ever since maybe it's just since I saw the woman in the reflection of the TV, I have been very unsettled by mirrors. Mm-hmm. I hate mirrors, especially in the dark. Mm-hmm. Walking through my house, we have like a big living room, a dining room, and then our kitchen. So I have to walk all the way through the living room and the dining room and the kitchen to get to like the fridge if I want to go and get something to eat in the middle of the night. Mm-hmm. And I cannot look in the mirrors. Yeah. And I feel like they're watching me. We have really old mirrors. My mom has very good style and interior decoration sense. I think I hope that I received that from her. But she wanted to make, because we had like wainscoting, I guess that's what you call it, like when it's like square paneling on your walls. We have that. And she put mirrors in the panels, so it kind of like looked like Versailles. Mm-hmm. And like kind of echoed it. I don't mind those mirrors because they're newer. Okay. I don't like all the like old mirrors we have. We have a lot of old mirrors.
Do you believe that like superstition that an old mirror can like trap like a soul if someone's died?
I don't know, but there's something about it. Like I don't know if like subconsciously I'm like they go into like another realm or what, mm-hmm. but I am very unsettled by them. Yeah. And I love mirrors. I love the frames. They're so beautiful, but at night I just cannot handle it. And I remember being like around 16 and like hating being anywhere but the family room, because we have a living room, family room, and like all those rooms. Mm-hmm. There's a distinction in our house. Family room is like the very casual room, and the living room is like where you have parties. Mm-hmm. And the family room has no mirrors. So I'm totally fine there. That's like home base. But as soon as I go in the living room where there's at least 1 or 2 mirrors always up, mm-hmm. and the dining room always has around 5 up, I am very unsettled. Yeah. I don't, it's just something, I feel like they're looking at me. Mm-hmm. I don't know who is looking at me. I don't know if it's specifically the mirrors. It does kind of make sense to me when someone dies, you know, the old superstition that you cover the mirrors because you don't want them like having their soul caught or like them not being able to pass or onto the other side. But my grandmother died, and I didn't like insist on our mirrors being covered or anything. Mm-hmm. It was just, I don't know. I just
like a feeling.
It's just a feeling I get. I'm okay during day, but at night I have to like run through the living room and dining room.
I get that, because it's like when I was a kid, I never had like the feeling of feeling like I was being like looked at or watched or anything. But I remember even as like a young kid, like it even struck me as odd that it was so freaky to me because it was one of the few fears I had that, like, I hadn't seen represented a lot in, like, media and stuff. But, like, I hated looking at mirrors in the dark. And it was, like, I built this, like, weird kind of superstition in my head that, like, if you looked in a mirror in the dark, you'd see, like a dark version of yourself.
Right,
or, like,
yes,
something like
yeah,
that.
I totally get that. My fear is that there's someone behind me, and then I'll look in the mirror and there'll be something behind me.
Yeah.
That's my fear. Yeah, I totally get that. And then, I can remember seeing just a clip of a Twilight Zone episode from, I don't know how old I was, but it terrified me. And it's like the girl gets caught in another dimension with her dog, and they're like, and it's from, like, she went through a wall, like, not a mirror, but in my mind, it was like, I bet mirrors can do that.
Oh, yeah.
And, like, I don't know who came, but someone came to the house because her parents were like, she's trapped in another dimension in our wall. and he was like, I can fix it. And he gets, like, the chalk out and, like, puts his hand through the wall and, like, figures out where the door is. So he marks it off on the wall with chalk. That is so distinct in my mind because he did it so slowly and methodically that it was, like, it's obviously, like, dramatized, whatever that word is. But it terrified me because he dragged out so slow, and, like, in the other world that she was in, she could hear, like, echoing of their voices, and she was like, I'm right here, and they're like, they can't hear her, but she's obviously, like, can hear them, and they can't hear her. And it's just,
yeah, I feel that. Well, to segue to my experiences, because mine are very different than yours, but similar in that, funny enough, the whole mirror thing with feeling like you're being watched.
Yeah, I didn't know that you experienced that.
Yeah, I did.
But I mean, I'm fine with, like, on the back of, like, I share a room with one of our roommates, and she shares the living room with one of our other roommates. And we have a mirror. My roommate and I have a mirror on the back side of our door. That doesn't bother me. I don't know why. I think it's just old mirrors that bother me. New mirrors, I'm fine. Old mirrors, different ballgame.
That's interesting.
So, sorry. Let's go on to you.
No, that's okay. But yeah, I was gonna say, because similar to, like, the feeling of being watched, I don't get that with mirrors, but I have experienced sleep paralysis a few times, and this is, like, the most kind of intense experience I've had with kind of supernatural feeling things. And at one point during high school, I had like a few months where I had kept having, like, random episodes of sleep paralysis in the night. And then one night, I had sleep paralysis. It was obviously terrifying. So I went to sleep in my parents' room. And they had, like, a bed, like, not a bed, a couch at the end of their bed with a TV in front of it. So I slept on the couch. And then I woke up again during that night and had another episode of sleep paralysis. I went back to sleep, and then a third time that night I woke up and had sleep paralysis. But that time, and this was the first time this had happened to me with sleep paralysis, I saw something. I saw this, like, black figure, and it was moving slowly towards me, and it had, like, an old camera in its hands. Like, one of the ones you, like, look down into and has, like, a mirror in it to look out and see whatever, like, the lens is, you know, photographing. So, like, that was, like, a very distinct feeling of feeling like I was being watched and, like, very vulnerable because I couldn't move, I couldn't say anything. And, like, the TV was, like, on, but, like, it was, like, had the TV static on it. And then as soon as I, like, snapped out of it and, like, could move again, it was gone, and, like, the TV was just, like, some random show in the middle of the night. But it was, like, hands down, like, the scariest experience of my life. And then, like, yeah, I have a lot of, like, kind of weird dream hallucination type things. I mean, hallucinations only as in, like, waking dreams, mostly. Or so they say. I had, before the sleep paralysis thing, I once woke up, this one sounds kind of silly. I woke up on, like, the third floor of a house, which is basically, like, a finished attic that we use as a rec room. And, we had, like, a bed up there, for, like, sleepovers and stuff. So I woke up on that bed, and there was, like, a foot sticking out of the wall. Looked plain as day, like a real foot. And I literally was sitting there, and I was, like, freaked out, obviously. But I was also, like, I have to see if this is real or if I'm imagining it. So I literally put my hand on, like, the bottom of this foot and, like, felt like human flesh on my hand. And I just, like, slowly got out of that bed, backpedaled, and just, like, ran down the stairs and did not go up to that room for the rest of the day. Never saw anything like it again. But, yeah, it's a lot less experiences than Kirsten. But,
they're really interesting.
very odd, yeah.
I think we have time definitely to talk about shadow people a little bit.
Yeah.
If that's cool with you. But I think first I just want to talk about the foot one. Because it's totally bizarre to me that you were wide awake. Like, you were awake when this happened. And you touched this foot.
Yeah.
And it was a human foot sticking out of a wall.
It was so bizarre. It was literally, like, up to the ankle sticking out of the wall.
That's so bizarre, but also just... why?
I have no idea.
What? And I remember because I dabble in. I'm also a practicing witch, and I have a crystal that we kind of speak to sometimes, and I mean it doesn't speak back, but it's a pendulum. It answers and in motion. And we asked it whose foot it was, and it said that there was an entity living on your land. Mm-hmm. Not connected to the house, but it was not that entity's foot. Which makes me wonder, whose foot?
Yeah.
That's the question. Whose foot? And why? Mm-hmm. Maybe they were just trying to metaphorically kick your butt out of there. They wanted that rec room.
Maybe.
What does that wall lead to? Is it the outside? Is it another room?
There's a like, we use it for storage because since it's a finished attic, like, it's like basically like the corners of the eaves of the house. And my dad, like, built like a shelf that, like, actually opens so that we can use that space as storage. So it's basically like a storage space back there.
Interesting. Okay. Now I think we can definitely talk about shadow people.
Yeah, for sure.
So just a quick intro to shadow people. I recently started listening to the Astonishing Legends podcast on Spotify, and I just think they're fantastic. Shout out. I think they're just wonderful. They do a really good job. They definitely go check them out if you're interested in this kind of subject. Not just paranormal stuff, but they cover pretty much exactly what we'll be covering. But I think, just a little side note, I think it's kind of more interesting since we're younger girls, women, who, and I don't really hear about women in this kind of, it's usually older men.
Yeah. And
I don't mean older by like, he's like 80. I mean older by like 40s, 30s, men who are more interested in this subject. And I think as women, it's an interesting dynamic, coming from a different side, because I think women tend to be more sensitive and have a little bit more connection with that realm. But I mean, of course, I think there are probably men who are way more sensitive than I am, and everything else. I mean, so let's just talk a little bit about shadow people. Introduction. That was a really quick rant. So shadow figures or shadow people have really been around forever. There's evidence of them being around since the dawn of time, or since there was complex thought in humanity, or in the human
evidence, as in like accounts of people seeing them.
Yes, yeah, accounts as in like not real. I don't know if there's any artistic representation, but definitely like people saying, "Oh, I saw this today. I saw a shadow figure," or like a phantom monk, as apparently they were called in the Middle Ages. And it was terrifying. And there's just a large amount of evidence proving that it's not just human thought. It's not just built in our
minds
playing tricks. Because Holly, you said that you hadn't even known about this phenomena before you had your sleep paralysis experience. And another thing is that they're very much connected to sleep paralysis. Not every single experience is related to sleep paralysis, but a lot of them are. And many scientists, there's only been one true study on the subject, and if you want to hear about that, you can listen to the Astonishing Legends podcast. They go into a pretty good depth with it. Yeah. But there's enough people to say that it's not just sleep paralysis causing it. Because there are people who say, I saw it in broad daylight. There are people who I can remember on the show The Dead Files. I can't remember the woman's name. She's a sensitive psychic. She's a psychic. I think she goes by a psychic medium. And I remember watching one episode and her saying she saw them as a child, and they told her basically to do things that would end up killing herself, like accidentally, like dying. They told her, like, put a fork in an electrical socket, which is terrifying. Yeah. Especially, like...
And she didn't know as a kid that was a bad thing.
She didn't know it was a kid it was a bad thing. She said she was only around 2 or 3. And I think that's really interesting because that's when I started seeing stuff, 3 or 4.
Well, it's the fact that, like, they're telling her things that are harmful that she doesn't realize are harmful until later that really freaks me out, because it's like, even when I had heard of it and I had experienced it myself, I was like, well, there's even, like, that psychological, like, explanation for why you see faces and things. So,
right,
like, it makes... So, I mean, at first I was kind of like, oh, that freaks me out that, like, other people also see these, like, shadow figures when they have sleep paralysis, so maybe this is, like, a thing. But then I was also, like, you know, given, like, the psychological reasons behind, like, people seeing faces and things. Like, we've all seen people, so it does make sense that you would imagine people or whatever.
Right.
But then, like, the idea of them telling her to do things that are harmful that
she wouldn't even know.
Yeah, telling her to do things that she doesn't understand the meaning of until later.
Right. Like,
is what's bizarre.
Like, that... It's very bizarre and very disturbing. Yeah. Because she... Like, I don't think it's built... Like, she obviously wouldn't have known that electricity can kill you, and especially as a small child, that many volts can do damage.
You can't invent something that you don't know about.
Exactly. She couldn't have just automatically been like, oh, like, well, this could hurt me. She wouldn't have known.
Yeah.
That could hurt her. And obviously we're going along the assumption that these entities do know that it would hurt her.
Yeah.
But there's just many accounts from people that have never heard of it, especially since we have one here that you say you had no idea of this phenomenon.
Never had heard of it.
Did you look it up afterwards? Were you like, oh, maybe this is, or did you hear about it and then you were like, oh, wait.
I looked into sleep paralysis and I saw kind of theories about how people used to say a lot that it was like a demon sitting on your chest. That was causing the sleep paralysis, but I never really looked into, like, kind of the things I had seen during sleep paralysis. So I didn't learn about, like, shadow people until you had told me about it when I shared this with you.
Oh, yeah, and that was probably in October and November.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been having a lot of weird experiences in this apartment. I don't know if it's just attached to the apartment, per se, but I think it's all of us, because I think all of us are somewhat sensitive. Kind of being around the same area, and all of us, like, congregating around each other, that might be starting it, because our other roommate, who Holly shares a room with, and our other friend who lives down the hall have all been seeing things out of the corner of their eye, like black blobs. Explain it.
Well, I oftentimes see, like a black shadow in, like, the ceiling area of kind of our living space, like our living room. And a friend of ours who is over here all the time.
He actually lives here.
Yeah,
we have his name tag on our door. He lives here.
He sees it a lot too. It's like this kind of, it's almost like a black cloud that's, like, I'd say about, like, 3 feet long.
Oh, I didn't know it was that big.
Yeah, it's pretty good size. That's what I see, usually out of the corner of my eye, up near the ceiling. It's odd, because I've seen it quite a few times.
Yeah, I mean, he he has other experiences that maybe if he's ever on the podcast he can talk about, but it's along those lines. Yeah. And the fact that did he see it and then he mentioned it and you'd be like, oh, I saw it too, or was it afterwards that you started seeing it?
No, I mentioned it, I think, to him. I was like, oh, just saw that. And I was kind of like joking around about it, but I had. But I make like light of these things because that's just me.
Yeah, she's very emotionally closed.
I said that, and he was like, I think he was like, yeah, I've been seeing those too, like in your ceiling.
Yeah.
At least that's how I recall it. But, yeah, so I believe that we had both been seeing it, and then I mentioned it, and he was like, oh yeah, me too.
Oh, so he was like, oh
he
my
had
gosh,
already
wait.
seen it, yeah.
Yeah, that to me doesn't sound like, oh, it's just like a placebo effect or whatever that would, I think it would be a placebo effect where like, or what's the
Power
word?
of suggestion.
Power of suggestion, exactly. Placebo effect. What am I talking about?
But, I mean, related.
Related, but not exactly the same. But definitely, to me, if it had been like, oh, I started seeing it like a week after, then it would definitely be, to me, power of suggestion. But since he had already started seeing it, and you both were seeing it and not telling each other, that, to me, kind of lends credence and kind of evidence that it's kind of spooky. I mean, no one really knows what shadow figures are, and I think it's really interesting because you said yours had a camera, and it was like, it was aimed at you?
Yes.
That just like runs a shiver up my spine. That's really terrifying. But also, I could not find any evidence of anybody else saying, oh, I saw a shadow figure that had a camera.
Yeah, I don't know. That's part of what makes me feel like it was like something that just like that I was projecting, because it was like an old camera. It was one that you look down into. It has a mirror that reflects it, right?
And don't you have like a camera
I have
collection?
an old camera collection, and I've seen cameras like that before personally. So that's what makes me doubtful, like
of it, yeah.
somewhat, because
and definitely the scientific community, if like anybody who is like a science major or anything, would definitely say, like one of my best friends, she would say that's sleep paralysis.
Yeah,
but I think you have to experience it. I've never experienced sleep paralysis. I've experienced extreme nightmares and terrifying nightmares, horrible things. But I don't think you can fully grasp the terror.
Yeah,
I know I can't because I've never even experienced it. But from what I hear, people are absolutely terrified. Yeah, and it's just like you're so vulnerable.
It's legitimately the most terrified I've ever been in my life, and that on top of even the foot thing. The most visceral dream, whatever, that I've ever had. Now,
around the time that you started having sleep paralysis, obviously, I don't think you're having it anymore.
No, I'm not.
Or were you in a lot of stress, or?
Yeah, I was. I think it was like junior year of high school.
So like college applications and stuff.
So I was like pretty stressed at that time.
Oh wait, that's senior year.
Or I thought it was around college application time, so maybe it was senior year. I was thinking it was junior year because of college applications, but it must have been senior year then. Yeah, because it was around college application time.
Right.
And I was very stressed. Yeah, I think it was stress-induced because I was having trouble sleeping already.
Right.
From stress. So I think that might have been part of it. Also, I kept trying to lucid dream, and I don't think that was helping.
Yes. Lucid dreaming, if you don't know, it's when you are in the dream and realize that you're dreaming. And a lot of people say that once you realize that you're in a dream, anything is possible, and like there are no limits to what you can do. But I've also heard that once you figure out how to lucid dream, that like the ability to do anything kind of goes away because you realize that you're dreaming and like kind of real life.
So your imagination is kind of like
it's more limited.
Yeah.
And like real life scenarios come into play instead of like I'm flying on the back of a dragon.
That's interesting.
I would like to think that you can do whatever you want, but maybe not. But definitely someone who is more of a scientific mind would say, oh, definitely sleep paralysis. And I'm sure you did have sleep paralysis, but the main argument on the sides of sleep paralysis is it paranormal or is it scientific? I think it's both.
Yeah.
My kind of theory on that is that people who are experiencing sleep paralysis are sensitive and they are in such a stressful situation that negative things or negative entities feel it and are drawn to it. They just are like, ooh, yes, that's really nice. Like that's their thing. Like they just like want, like they live off of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it just is a benefit that they can terrify you.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe since yours had a camera, it like knew that you had a camera collection, and it was like trying to like kind of freak you out and maybe make you more uncomfortable around things that you like.
Mm-hmm.
So then it could just keep being suctioned onto you, like keep making you terrified. That's very plausible to me. I don't know about you, but
yeah. I mean, like I said, I would not call myself a skeptic, but then I wouldn't say like, oh, I 100% think that's what happened.
Right.
Either. I'm open to thinking, to considering different ideas, but I don't think there's ever going to be a point where I'm like, that's 100% what happened. That's certainly, your explanation, I think, certainly makes complete sense if you're willing to believe.
Right.
That, that those kind of things can happen.
Yeah, and we're not asking anybody to believe anything. Yeah. We're just going through theories.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what the podcast will be, going through theories and trying to come to some sort of conclusion. Mm-hmm. Maybe not on this one, because this is very general and open-ended.
Yeah.
But there's also suggestions that they could be from an alternate dimension. Mm-hmm. And they are just similar to us, but the veil and wherever you are, or like your openness during that time, it's just easier for you to see when you're that open. Mm-hmm. I don't like that they look like they're in black morph suits, but I mean, that's what I hear, what they look like. I've never seen one, so I don't know.
It was really odd. It looked like a black silhouette, like it looked like it was wearing clothes. I didn't really pay attention to what it was wearing, but
I wouldn't want to ask it back and see what it was.
Yeah, no. But it looked like it had been illuminated from the back, which I guess is...
Was it in front of the TV?
It was in front of the TV, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, the TV was behind it on the wall. So it was kind of illuminated from the back, but...
It was solid.
Yeah, it was solid, for sure.
Okay.
It was also odd, though, because I could still see the camera clearly.
That's weird, yeah.
And I could tell it was looking down at the camera, even though I couldn't see, like, line detail within, like, the figure. It was very odd. But, yeah, it does sound like a shadow person. Yeah, sorry. It sounds like a shadow person to me. Because, yeah, it was, like, completely black, even if it didn't make complete logical sense. Mm-hmm. Because the camera was it was not in complete black.
And they don't have to I don't think they always make logical sense. I think they're just trying to freak you out. Maybe that one was just trying to test you and see what freaked you out. But maybe it was just like, oh, she's not, like, that terrified.
Yeah, it's just so odd to me, because I feel like in most dreams, and maybe, I don't know, maybe this isn't true, but for me... I feel like in most dreams, maybe your mind isn't aware that it can do this, but like your mind logically makes sense of the way light works and the way shadows fall and stuff like that. But like logically speaking, it didn't make sense in what I saw here. So it's like very much in the nature of a shadow person to be completely in black, even if it doesn't make logical sense with like the lighting situation or something like that. So
I think maybe that's just your mind filling in the gaps.
Yeah.
And, like trying to make sense of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then just the last theory is that they're aliens.
Yeah.
And I suggested this the other night, and you were just like, nope, nope.
Get that out of here.
And I said, what if it was an alien recording you for, like, research?
Oh, I hate that.
Yeah, she really didn't like that one, because I always try and come up with an explanation, and she was just like, nope, that one's out of the window. We're not talking about that one again.
X-Files creep me out too much for that stuff.
Yeah, true. So... I think that should pretty much wrap up the show. So
that's our personal experiences.
Those are our personal experiences. We shouldn't really be talking about personal experiences for the next few episodes unless it's like demanded, but I don't think that we stimulated that much interest in our personal experiences. This episode is more of like an introduction to us and why we're interested in the subjects that we're going to be talking about.
That's Spooky Betches for you.
That's Spooky Betches. See you on the next show.